Welcome to the online launch of Kevin Crowe's short story collection, No Home in This World.
The roots of their raising. I don't want to say too much about it, as it has several twists, and I don't want to give away any plot spoilers. What I will say is that, like most of my stories, it's gone through many drafts and written in different voices and tenses before finding the best structure for the story. Before reading it, I would like to thank three people who have helped me achieve the best I can. One is David Downing, the former editor of the Highland LGBT+ magazine Undividing Lines. I regularly send him drafts of stories I'm writing, and he always responds with the most wonderfully constructive criticism. He's seen early drafts of all the stories in this collection. The second is a Scottish novelist, short story writer and biographer Brendan Gisby, who used to run the Scottish literary site Mac Storytellers. But the confidence was at a low ebb. He encouraged me to send work to him, and he published several of my stories on his website. He continues to encourage me. And finally, I'd like to thank Isabel Kenyon of Fly on the Wall Press, not only for publishing this collection, but also because of her sympathetic editing. Every writer, no matter how experienced, needs a good editor, and Isabel is that. Her light touch and suggestions help me to improve the stories. So I'm going to read the first story in the collection. This is the collection, No Home in This World, available at $7.99. And the first story, The Roots of Their Raising. 1. Tom saw her standing at the bar from across the dance floor. He weaved his way through the dancers and stood next to her, apparently intent on getting the barman's attention. He turned to her, saying, "You could die of thirst here." She sighed. "That's a crap pickup line." She turned away from him and took a sip of her drink. All he could see of her was her shoulder-length curly ginger hair, which was what had attracted him in the first place. She turned around. Her cold green eyes seemed to pierce him. "You staring at me?" she asked. "Sorry." He tried a tentative smile. "Would you like a drink?" She shrugged. "Dry white wine." She turned to the bar and raised a finger. Immediately a barman came running. "Another one of these," she said. Pointing to Tom, she added, "He's paying." Tom ordered the same for himself, fiddled in his pocket for some money, paid the barman, and turning to her said, "Cheers, I'm Tom. What's your name?" "Gail." "Not that it's any of your business." "Cheers, Gail. Are you always this friendly?" Crap chat up lines and sarky to boot. She took a sip of her wine. "Thanks for the drink." "That's okay. Sorry about the smart-ass comments." "God, have you always been a doormat?" She sounded exasperated. "I insult you, you buy me a drink. I insult you again, you apologize. Geez, I've only known you 5 minutes, and already you're irritating the shit out of me." "Sorry. Look, can we start again?" Tom felt himself blushing. She started giggling. "Your face is as red as my hair." He went even redder. "You're not going to be a crybaby, are you?" Tom shook his head. "No, you're safe. I'm always blushing like a schoolboy. It'd take more than a ginger nut to make me cry." "What the fuck? How are you?" She went to slap him, but he grabbed her wrist before her hand could make contact with his face. "So it's okay for you to take the piss out of me when I turn the tables? You don't like it? Enjoy your drink." He let go of her wrist and made to walk away. "Hold on," she called after him. He turned round. "Look," she said, "sorry and all that. It's just that, shit, this is embarrassing," he suggested. Normally placid, Tom soon discovered The only way to survive was to fight back, and even their love-making sometimes resembled a battlefield. They argued over everything: whose turn it was to cook or clean, what music to play or TV program to watch, which pub or restaurant to go to, even whether to go out or stay in. One night, they come to agree whose flat to go to. They were both adamant they needed to be in their own space, and they were both equally sure they should spend the night together. In the end, no decision was made, so for the first time in over a month, they slept apart. Not that either of them got much sleep. Tom wasn't able to settle. Lying on one side, then on the other, then on his back, he tried reading but couldn't concentrate. He kept looking at the clock, surprised at how little time had passed. He heard the doorbell and tried to ignore it. When his mobile phone rang, he gave in, picked it up, and asked who it was. "For Christ's sake, open the door. I'm freezing out here." He let Gail in. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." "Ha! If you hadn't been so bloody pig-headed, we could both be asleep in my bed. Or asleep in mine. Come to think of it, now you're here." It was that night they agreed to make the commitment to live together. There didn't seem any point in spending money on two homes. They were both teachers, but at different schools. "I bet all the kids are scared stiff of you," he asked her one day. She looked at him, an evil grin on her face. "No, I'm all sweetness and light with the kids." The parents, however, they both burst out laughing. Only a couple of years difference between them, with Gail being the eldest, although Tom, who had gone prematurely bald, looked the older. They soon discovered they had similar interests: hill walking, cycling, tastes in music. That didn't stop them bickering, even when they both wanted to do the same thing. 2. Tom had been adopted. He was relaxed about it. His parents had told him when he was quite young, and he'd had years to get used to the idea. His birth mother had had mental health problems, was a single mother, and when unable to cope, had turned to drink. Both her children had been taken into care. He told Gail he was only a toddler at the time and had no recollection of his 3 years of life with his birth mother. His parents had been happy to help him trace her. She'd agreed to meet him, and they had an emotional and tearful reunion. She's okay now. She's off the booze and on permanent medication. She's really sad about what's happened, but says, looking at me and seeing how well it turned out, she made the right decision. She regrets not being there for most of my childhood and that me and my sister were separated, but she had little say in the matter. "Have you ever seen your sister?" Gail asked. He shook his head. "She's got her life, I've got mine. She's never made any attempt to get in touch, so she probably doesn't want to know about her past." He paused. "Still, I think Maria would like to see her daughter before she dies." "Maria?" "I call my birth mother by her name, Maria. She's more like an older friend. I call my adopted parents Mum and Dad." Gail asked if he wasn't confusing having two families. "No," he replied, "it's wonderful, the best of both worlds." "Sounds bloody confusing to me. One set of parents is enough for me, one too many probably." She stood up. "I'm going out for a walk." She began to put on her coat. "Want any company?" She shrugged her shoulders. "Please yourself." He took that as an invitation. They were silent for a while, walking along the riverbank in the spring sunshine. Coots, moorhen and mallards were navigating the water, no doubt heading for the outing. People were beginning to look at them. Tom always felt self-conscious about arguing in public, but it never seemed to bother Gail. When she saw people staring, she gave them the finger. He knew there was no point in trying to reason with her. The only thing to do was to ride her anger and wait for her to calm down. So he sat in silence, drinking his tea and feeding a few scraps to the birds. "It's all this talk of parents. It pisses me off." Something was wrong. "Let's stop at the riverside for a cup of tea." If you like, Gail replied. They sat on the benches. What's on your mind? Tom asked. Nothing. Come on, you've been silent all afternoon. So what? So what? If I don't want to speak now, I won't. Got it? Got it, you bastard? As she spoke, her voice got louder and louder until she was shouting. People were beginning to look at them. Tom always felt self-conscious about arguing in public, but it never seemed to bother Gail. When she saw people staring, she gave them the finger. He knew there was no point in trying to reason with her. The only thing to do was to ride her anger and wait for her to calm down. So he sat in silence, drinking his tea and feeding a few scraps to the birds. It's all this talk of parents. It pisses me off. She was looking into the distance as she spoke. Tom wanted to put his arms around her, but he knew better. When she was angry or upset, any touch, no matter how sympathetic or well-meant, would just make things worse. He had the impression she hated feeling vulnerable. She felt she had to be strong all the time. I haven't seen my parents in years. Don't you know if they're still alive? Don't even care. She fell silent again. Tom rushed to comment. You've never spoken about your parents before. You never asked. I'm asking now. Bugger all to tell, really. I think I was a disappointment to them. I remember overhearing them brag about me. I've been in trouble over something. I was always getting into trouble. Anyone who dared call me a ginger nut got it. Other kids were scared of me, which suited me fine. I got sent home from school for fighting. I didn't care. The boy who annoyed me was in a right state, blood pouring from his nose. He wouldn't upset me again. Of that I was sure. I was given a bollocking by the head, another by my parents, and was sent to my room. When I heard the raised voices, I tiptoed down the stairs so I could hear what they were saying. Dad was saying they should never have had me, that I was a mistake. Mum was saying she knew I could be difficult, but perhaps I'd get better as I grew up. She fell silent again. Then she stood up and started walking back along the riverbank. Tom gathered his things and when he caught her up, asked, "What happened then?" "Nothing really. I cried and cried and cried. I've barely cried since then. I realized I have to be even tougher. I ran away, was caught, ran away again, and ended up in a children's home." God, that must have been rough. Gail laughed. "Yeah, fucking right. For everyone else, that is. I told you it was a tough bitch. God, I could do with a drink. There's a pub near here, isn't there?" 3. His adopted parents and birth mother about Gail, raving about what a wonderful woman she was. He did warn them she had a short fuse, but didn't tell them how short. They were all keen to meet her, and though Gail took some persuading, eventually she agreed. She met Tom's adoptive parents first, who were every bit as wonderful as he had made out. They were both tactile, which made the Gail a bit uncomfortable. She wasn't one for being touched or touching others, but for Tom's sake, she tolerated it. They were in so many ways a traditional couple, regular churchgoers, both retired. He was content with his gardening and she was happy doing the cleaning and cooking. Yet they brought up a child who was not their own, showed him so much love, and were happy he'd found someone. If they had any reservations about Gail, they didn't show it. His mother cooked them a wonderful meal. They all drank too, and it was the early hours of the morning before their taxi arrived. Gail had been nervous about meeting Tom's parents, but that had gone so well, she was looking forward to meeting his birth mother, Maria. She told Tom as much. He wasn't so sure. "She's really nice," he said, "but she's a bit different. Not everyone takes to her." "Well, not everyone takes to me, you know." She kissed him on his nose. He grinned. "Yeah, that's true." He looked her up and down. Definitely more normal than you. Hey, better be careful or I'll... You'll what? She showed him what. Afterwards they showered and dressed and got ready to meet his birth mother. Tom had told Maria hadn't had a drink for a long time. She was an alcoholic, and one drink had set her back on the path that had caused her so many problems all those years ago. The door was answered by a small elderly woman with grey hair, spectacles and a broad smile. When she saw Gail, the smile faded and her hand went to her mouth. Maria, what's wrong? Tom asked. She shook her head. Nothing, she replied, nothing. Just a silly old woman who thought, don't mind me, come in, come in. She closed the door behind them, led them through to a cosy, if overheated living room, sat them down and then disappeared. A short time later, she reappeared with a pot of tea, cups, milk, sugar and a plate of sandwiches. As they drank and ate, Tom was aware of Maria glancing at Gail. Every so often, when she was talking, she would lose her thread. Sometimes when Tom or Gail was speaking, she would stare into space. Gail didn't seem to notice anything untoward. After some time, Tom asked, Maria, what's up? What's on your mind? Nothing, she replied, shaking her head. Nothing, nothing at all. Yes, there is, he said. Out with it. Her hands began to shake. Tom stood up and gently took the teacup off her, placing it on the side table. A look akin to panic came over her face. Tom knelt before her, took her hands and said, Maria, whatever it is that's worrying you, whatever it is, together we can sort it. She shook her head, this time more vigorously. No, no, no one can sort it out. It's a mess, a fucking mess. She had burst into tears. Excuse me, she said, dashing out of the room. Tom stood up. I'm sorry about that. I better find out what's wrong. She doesn't normally swear. Won't be long. After what seemed an eternity, he returned, his head bowed, his eyes red. We better go. All the way home he was silent. Whenever Gail asked him what was going on, all he could say was, later. They arrived home. He poured 2 large drams, drank one himself and passed the other to Gail. He sat opposite rather than next to her. For God's sake, Tom, what's going on? What have I done? Tell me about your parents. What? You know all about them. What more do you want to know? I want to know if you're adopted. She shook her head. No. Are you sure? Well, they'd have told me, wouldn't they? He refilled his whiskey glass. Maria recognized that birthmark on your face. It was one of the first things I noticed about you. She recognized that birthmark because her daughter, my sister, was born with one just like that. I didn't know until today. No, it can't be. Lots of people have facial birthmarks, don't they? Tom spoke slowly and quietly, so quietly she could barely hear him. But she recognized your birthmark. She recognized the shape. He was silent for a few moments. We can't continue to sleep together, not until we know for sure. He could gulp down the rest of his whiskey, rose from the chair, and went to the spare room, locking himself in. Gail stormed after him and began banging on the door. Let me in, she screamed. You bastard, let me in. We have to talk. Sighing, Tom opened the door. Gail sat on the edge of the bed. You can't just do this. You can't just dump me like this. You can't. Look, Gail, just until we know for sure. Just until then. And what then? What then? If I am your sister, so what? Will it alter the way you feel? Will it? You told me you loved me. I trusted you. You're the first person I've ever really trusted. Don't betray that trust, please. She moved to kiss him, but he ducked out of her embrace. I'm sorry, really sorry. Of course I love you. Nothing would ever alter that. But brother and sister, it's incest. It's... His voice tailed off. She had a DNA test. When they got the results, Gail told him it didn't matter and they could still be lovers, saying, if that's against the law, then fuck the law. Tom shook his head. He said he couldn't. He told her the very thought of making love to his sister made him. But she said, we made love hundreds of times. None of those times made you sick. I'm the same woman. You're the same man. He yelled at her. It's not the same. Can't you see? Everything's changed now we know the truth. He pulled a suitcase from the top of the wardrobe and began packing it. I'll move out, leave you the flat. And don't worry, I'll pay my share of the mortgage. I'm really, really sorry, Gail. You, she screamed. Fuck you. I never want to see you again. And fuck my parents for not telling me. She slammed the door, leaving him to his packing. 4. It was 3 weeks later when he discovered he still had his key to the flat they once shared. He decided he'd better return it, giving him the opportunity to see how she was doing. When he knocked, no one answered. After trying several times, he used a spare key to unlock the door. He found her body hanging from a rope. The post-mortem indicated she had been pregnant. Well, thank you. And